Looks worse in black and white.
Well, I could have been an actor, but I wound up here. I just have to look good, I don't have to be clear. Come and whisper in my ear, give us dirty laundry. Kick 'em when they're up, kick 'em when they're down. Kick 'em when they're up, kick 'em when they're down.
Good morning, Tampa Bay. This is Down and Dirty. If you're listening on Friday at 10 a.m. to WMNF, you've tuned in to the right station at the right time. My name is Mario Nunez. I'm one of your co-hosts today. I'm seated alongside my broadcast partner.
Good morning, Mario. John Dingfelder. How are you?
I'm doing good.
You know what? We're going to have to dock Jason's hefty volunteer salary.
Absolutely.
You know, a little hefty.
But that's okay. He gave us a little preview as to one of the other songs that's coming up in a minute, and it's a little foreshadowing. So maybe his intuition and maybe that error was actually something pre-planned.
Oh, indeed.
We can go with that.
Mysteries are deep.
Good morning, Jason. So today we've got a couple of guests in studio that are going to, I think, intrigue you with their knowledge, with their experience. Those of you that have been in Tampa for a hot minute and in the Bay Area would know these two names certainly. Before we get to our guests, hey, let's get down and dirty with a couple of things that might be on your mind, Johnny, on my mind, that over the past week or so have just taken us aback. You got something?
No, what's on your mind, Mario? Because I was at the beach for a couple of days, and the only thing on my mind was surf and sand.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about fireworks. Can we talk about fireworks for a second? Fireworks. Can we talk about fireworks for a second? Okay, thank you. So July 4th is one of those holidays that comes about every year, as is New Year's Eve. And, every year we do the same thing. We talk about the stress that it gives, puts on everybody, the animals, certainly the ones that are outside, the ones that are inside. And there's a calamity each and every year. And this year was no exception. We had something that happened on the causeway that was really disturbing. A 7-year-old child was accidentally shot because people were gathered at the causeway to watch the celebration. And, of course, everybody's carrying guns these days. Why? Why, you might ask, John? Well, because there's permitless carry now in the state. You don't even have to have instructions. You don't even have to have any kind of classes.
It's tragic.
And things like this will happen. Okay, so that's a nice segue into also we're looking at temperatures, right? Temperatures in the Bay Area that have ascended to heights and record numbers that we've never seen before. You were at the beach, John. Did it feel extra hot to you this time? This time around?
Jumped in the Gulf often, and
how was that bath water?
Wasn't so bad.
Yeah,
wasn't so bad.
About 98 degrees, but the weather.
And you know what?
The water temperature.
The water was so clear, and I had my goggles on, and I was swimming through Sheep's Head, beautiful schools of Sheep's Head that were like 12, 14 inches long.
Absent your gig or your spear gun.
I'll tell you what. They would have been in trouble. They would have been in serious trouble.
All I'm offering to you is, if you've been in the Bay Area for any length of time, you know full well that these temperatures and this meteorological phenomenon that we're experiencing is nothing normal. It's not supposed to be 97 degrees here, which it was on July 4th. The hottest day recorded on Earth in 125,000 years.
It's the temperature.
125,000 years. Thank you. And oh, by the way, it has nothing to do with climate change or any of these things that are happening.
Yeah. So on a lighter note.
No, we don't want to go lighter. This is down and dirty.
No, but on a lighter note, we, Lynn and I went over on the 4th of July evening to Clearwater.
Yes. And
met some friends up there, and they just opened up this beautiful venue. I can't remember the name of it, The Sound. And it's a big, giant amphitheater with 4,000 seats. City of Clearwater spent $80 million on that and the surrounding park. It was a beautiful facility. The Florida Orchestra played for 2 hours. It was wonderful. We sat there. They had a couple of oak trees, so we sat under the shade and listened to the orchestra. And then afterwards at 9 o'clock, 9:30, they shot off the fireworks right over the bay. It was a quintessential Florida evening. It's beautiful.
Okay, so we know who's down and we know who's dirty. All right. You're not going to let me be sad today, huh?
No,
it's Friday, the end of the week.
We are not. We are in a lighter mood this today.
All right, so I'll leave my comments on the governor for another time, okay? Because that's a whole nother show. Well, he's out.
What's he up to?
Well, he's out there parading around. And oh, by the way, this is fabulous. This guy is, as much as he's trying to connect with people, and he's the guy that never was invited to sit at the cool kids table in either junior high or high school, right? So he's got an axe to grind. He's out there trying desperately to connect with the people in the upper Midwest and in New Hampshire and all these places. And his numbers keep dropping, which is fabulous. And while he's out there doing this glad handing routine, malaria is on the rise. Can you imagine? We eradicated malaria in our state in 1951, in this country in 1951, but yet while this is happening, the two main posts in the state government are without any kind of control, right? Nobody's at the helm of the Department of Health in the state because they're leaving. They're leaving state government because our governor, he's just not one that you want to work for.
Well, first he decimated Florida, and now he abandoned Florida. But other than that, he's a great guy.
Yeah, there you go.
He loves meatballs, though. And pudding.
Meatball Ron.
All right, so listen, let's remind our folks that they can call in
Absolutely.
Today after we get the show going with our two guests. That's 813-239-9663.
If you'd like to send us an email, and remember, this is all about inclusion, right? This show is, we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear your opinions on not only the topics and the guests, but we want you to contribute as well. So the email is dj@wmnf.org. And if you'd like to text us, because people do that these days as well, it's 813-433-0885. But call us. We love it when you call us.
Did you mention our phone answer?
Yes, and well, I would love for you to do that. I'll leave that to you, sir.
Our beautiful, charming, brilliant phone answer also happens to be my wife, Lynn Marvin Dingfelder.
It's getting embarrassing, John.
If you just want to call and chat with Lynn, she'll be glad to chat with you. But 813-239-9663.
And she's got a mic, too, so if she feels like she needs to join this conversation, we can open her
you're in
mic.
trouble now.
There we are.
There she is.
And there we are. Thank you, Lynn.
How are you in that other booth, honey?
Missing you, sweetie.
There you go.
Every-
She's feet away, y'all.
Every
She's
minute,
feet
every
away.
minute without me.
Absence makes the heart grow fond.
One of our guests is also a marriage counselor, so
That's right. It's
not that we need it.
All right, well, let's pick it up from there. That's a nice little segue. John, go ahead and introduce our first guest.
All right, let's introduce both of them, Jason.
With a little song.
And everything looks worse in black and white. Kodachrome, they give us those nice bright colors. You give us the greens of summers. Makes you think all the world's a sunny day. Oh yeah, I got an Nikon camera. I love to take a photo.
You might not have heard us, but we were definitely bouncing and singing to that song in the studio.
I got a Nikon camera.
I love to take a photograph. I mean, that just takes you right back to your junior high school years, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So, in our studio today, who you got? You got Andy?
I've got Andy. You got
Chip.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce Chip first?
All right, Chip Weiner, welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
So, Chip, let me read a little bio on you. Chip is a Tampa-based freelance photographer and photojournalist, born and raised on Davis Island. He specializes in food, documentary photographer, and portraits. He began his career with film cameras shooting bodybuilders at a friend's gym, and then he ended up with like a motorcycle gang or something like that. We'll have to talk about that either later on today or another.
right.
Yes, we will.
Another show. Then he got into photographing food and environmental shots. He loves images of people in their environment. I think that's where we met several times at various political events and community events. He also went to graduate school, got a master's of science degree in counseling psychology. When he's not shooting beautiful pictures, he's helping folks with their issues in South Tampa. I'm sure there's no shortage. He also is a teacher at the University of South Florida in journalism program. Chip, welcome.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
All right.
Chip.
See,
We know each other pretty
We
well.
do. We do.
Listen, and I'm grateful that you took the time this morning, along with our other guest, Andy Hughes. We'll get to you, Andy. We see you there, Andy. Stay awake, Andy. Chip, tell everybody a little bit about photography as it relates to the Bay Area, right, at large,
Yes.
and the importance of the photographs that you have recently, safe to say you discovered, or at least you have found a
I
fondness
became
for?
aware of them.
There you go.
yes. So,
There you go.
Yeah, the Tampa history, we're fortunate that we have this collection, first of all, with the Burgert brothers, which started back in the late 1800s and went through around 1960. And what I've done over the last several years is taken those photos and really rephotographed those same scenes on how they look today. But I think the importance of that collection is that we have the ability, we have this visual history to look back and see what Tampa's development has been for the last 100 and something years. And it's absolutely fantastic to be able to see the buildings, some of the things that are still there, some that aren't, but to have this representation of what this city has been for the last 100 and something years, it's just fantastic.
The Burgert brothers is just mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling.
Available online through the library system, Tampa Hillsborough Library System. I can sit there and that's a rabbit hole for me.
It really is. It's also available. Some of the shots are available through the USF Digital Collection, also available online. And there was another group at that same time. Their name was Robertson and Fresh. They were sort of friendly competitors to the Burgerts, and those are also at USF Digital Collection.
So how did we get into the next collection? How do we go into the 20th century?
Thanks for asking. As I was kind of wrapping things up and doing the Burgert rephotographing, talked with Andy out at USF, and we had some chats about things that were happening and some of the other things that were in the collection. And he asked me if I'd ever seen Skip Gandy's work. And I hadn't. I knew Skip. He and I actually met several years ago when I was doing a fashion shoot, and he let me use his airplane in the shoot, and it just came out fabulous. He had this gorgeous airplane, and
I assume he flew out of Peter O. Knight Airport.
That's where we did the shoot. Was actually at Peter O. Knight because he was a big guy out there, and. Anyway, so talked to Andy about it and started looking through some of the collections, some of the photographs at least that were online, and was amazed at what I saw. And so he let me start taking a look through some of the negatives because the majority of the 80,000 photos from
Repeat that again?
80,000
That's
photos.
that's a prolific.
It's a big number.
Hey, so
prodigious.
who's this Andy guy you keep referring
Right, so
to?
we've had two shout-outs for Andy Hughes. Let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about Andy Hughes. Born in Chicago, we won't hold that against him because he got here as soon as he could. Actually, he's very much a Floridian. Andy is an associate librarian in the special collections.
An honorary Tampano.
Oh, no, 100%. 100%. He's not wearing his hat today, but it's in the car. I know it is. He's got 2 degrees from the University of South Florida. He's a proud bull. History and English. But I think what we might know Andy mostly for is his ability to capture the written word and use it in ways that leave us all wanting for more. He's been published now on 3 different occasions. He was part and parcel to the wonderful book on the history of the Columbia Restaurant. He's also written a book called From Saloons to Steakhouses, a history of Tampa as it through the lens of its culinary experiences. And of course, maybe some people would say he's written the definitive book on the Cuban sandwich. That is still to be debated. Andy, twice we've called your name out. Now say hello so they can hear your voice.
Hello.
There he is.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, Andy. Mario, little shout out to your dad and the Columbia restaurant relationship.
Have mercy. Yeah, he's been there for a hot. Well, when he came back from New York to his beloved Tampa, trying to find a job, the first place.
What decade?
This was in the early 1950s.
Okay.
Mom and Dad came back in 51 with 2 sons in tow, and my father had already had.
But not the good one.
No, he wasn't here yet.
Okay.
He didn't come
All
until
right.
a little bit later.
The best comes last.
The end of the decade, yeah. So he found employment through the Waiters Union, right? Union 6. He found employment at the Columbia Restaurant ultimately and stayed there for about 25 years. And,
Wow.
and I think because he just turned, shout out to Felipe Nunez, who just turned 95 on the 29th of June. Thank you. He might be, and I think it's safe to say, the oldest living original waiter at the Columbia Restaurant. And by original, I mean that worked for the second generation caretaker, which is Casimiro Hernandez Jr., right? So there was Casimiro Sr., who started the saloon.
Wow.
Casimiro Jr. took it over and handed it off to Cesar Gunsmart. We know the rest of the history well. But my pop, he's so old. That's where you say, how old is he?
How old is he?
He actually worked for Casimiro Jr. It's pretty impressive. Happy
Wow.
birthday, Pop.
Well, Happy birthday, Dad.
Thanks for that shout out.
So, Andy, what was your involvement with the Skip Gandy collection?
So I was there when it arrived at the library.
Was there discussion? Do we want it? Do we not want it? Or was it a no-brainer?
Yeah, it was a no-brainer for me. I mean, certainly, I met Skip, and he wasn't quite sure what to do. He was winding down his years as a photographer and everything. And this was in 2011, right around then.
A fascinating guy.
Yeah.
I ran into Skip on a couple of occasions, I think maybe sailing at Davison Yacht Club and also, more importantly, environmental issues.
Right.
He was a huge environmentalist, had been documenting and chronicling from the air and the ground all the changes, many negative changes that have happened in the Tampa Bay area. But but the Gandy thing. Anybody who's listening goes, wait a second, Gandy. That sounds familiar.
Right. Yeah. And it was his relative, his grandfather,
Great-grandfather.
great-grandfather.
Right.
Who was responsible for building the Gandy Bridge, which eventually was kind of taken back by the government during World War II.
Yeah, the first bridge across the bay.
Right.
Because prior to that, and if anybody wanted to go to St. Pete, other than maybe flying across in that mail plane, but basically the average Joe or Josephine had to drive up and around Oldsmar and
Right.
Safety Harbor, and then come all the way down. That was probably a full day adventure on dirt roads, I would think.
Needed to pack a lunch, more than likely.
Or else take a boat, I guess. They probably were
taking a boat.
Boats going across.
Yeah, originally, I guess there was a toll for the bridge, and then I guess that's where the government got involved and said we don't want that to happen anymore.
Yeah, 'cause the servicemen were going across, between Tampa and Pinellas so much. So.
Listen, if you'd like to get in on the conversation, this is a good time to join us. Let's queue up the phones. Call us at 813-239-9663. 239-9663 in the 813 area code. Let me say that how lucky are we to have had not only the Burgert brothers, all 5, 6 of them? I mean, these guys were amazing. First of all, you had 6 sons back at the turn of the century, and they all joined the family business, the photography business. The Robertson Fresh Collection, which is also important to the history of Tampa, and now Gandy. And for those people that have been here for a minute, they'll recognize these names. There are others also that are important to us. Andy, tell us a little bit. Give us the richness of this history and why it's important.
And tell us a little bit about the collections generally.
Yeah. So, one of the things that sets us apart, if we're talking about the Burgert brothers, they're a commercial photography firm. So, it has its charms, but it also has its limitations as far as, only so many people were paying, to have pictures taken, et cetera.
Generally a very white collection.
Right.
Because sadly enough, they were the ones who had the money.
Right. And Gandy is something rather similar, except that it also has the aerial component. So this is really where it becomes a little more unique.
Separates
first
itself.
of all, about half the collection is the commercial stuff. And this is not just Tampa. This is Pinellas County. It's really up and down the west coast of Florida. But then you have this aerial photography, and really the main function of this photography, he had a special gyroscope that he had fashioned into his plane that...
This is the Skip, the most recent Skip.
Yeah, well, there was Sandy was his
Did
father.
Sandy fly too? His father?
He did.
Yes.
Okay.
He taught Skip.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and he was a photographer as well. Yes, Sandy. So, and he worked for the Tampa Daily Times.
Times first, and
Yeah.
probably transition to the Trib.
And so he really, the collection starts with him in like the 1950s and 60s, and then Skip really takes up the mantle in like around 1970, and the aerial photography becomes a really important part of what they're doing. So every time someone wants to do an aerial survey, so if McDonald's wants to open at an intersection, they get a picture taken. So it was kind of an interesting position that Skip was in the sense that he didn't really approve of a lot of the changes and especially the pollution that was going on.
But he was participating in it in a weird way.
Right, and he was helping to make it happen, and it was a big part of his livelihood and they didn't really like having to, hire Skip because, like, for example, if he saw Tico, doing some egregious, pollution, he'd take pictures of that, even though no one paid him to do that, and he had a wall of shame. So on the outside of his shop on Davis Island, he would have, all these images like shame on Tico, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
So a lot of times people did not like this kind of outspoken photographer.
Yeah, but he might have been the only game in town
Right,
when
and-
it came to aerial photography.
Right,
It
but
was.
a month later they would be going, "Hey, we need to build a new site, and Skip, would you fly for us again?" So.
Yeah.
He did a lot of work, not just for their sites, but they commissioned him to do a lot. Tico commissioned him to do a lot of just regular commercial work of different businesses and different buildings. And that's part of the greatness of this collection is that we have these images of buildings and so on around town.
Yeah, I think the other place that Skip and I crossed paths was, 25 years ago. The county mosquito control was spraying, I think it was malathion.
Malathion, yep.
And I was living on Davis Island at the time with my little children. And all of a sudden you go outside and there's this nasty mist coming over Davis Island, and and you realize and it smelled, and it was like drippy, sappy, nasty, and you look into it and it's like, oh my God, they're spraying malathion on Davis Island, and on the bay and on Tampa General Hospital and across South Tampa, et cetera, for mosquitoes.
Right.
And I went crazy. Starting to call people. I called Mr. Culbreth. No, that was a different issue. That was a Tico issue. But anyway, I started making phone calls and this sort of thing. And Skip Gandy got in touch with me. And I remember that because, he was on the same plane as I was in terms of just being appalled, that we were having these chemicals sprayed on the environment and on the people in South Tampa.
It's interesting the way his interest in the environment came to be. There's a photograph of his dad's car in their carport on Davis Island, which was right across the channel from the phosphate loading.
Right.
And he wrote with his finger in the dust something about, the phosphate. And I think that sort of started his interest possibly in the environment is because he lived on Davis Island when those ships were directly, because he lived right on the channel, directly across the channel from him.
And sulfuric acid,
Yes.
if you grew up there, Chip,
I did.
sulfuric acid would come blowing across and burn the paint off of people's cars on Davis Island. By the way, now it's Harbor Island, and
Right.
it's a whole different
It
ballgame.
was Seton Island back then.
Can I say, as you're describing this horrible situation, that I always thought it was kind of a privilege and a kind of a neat thing to have grown up on Davis Island. This is making West Tampa look pretty good right about now. I'm just saying.
Well,
if you hear Skip's description of it, because I've heard his
His oral history
His
at
oral
the
history.
Tampa Bay Estuary Program. I was
Correct.
going to mention that. If you want to hear 2 hours of Skip Gandy talking about his environmental issues,
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Estuary Program has a beautiful oral history.
And he talks about sort of the division on Davis Island of how it was sort of this desert, at least the part that he lived in, and the differing people and I guess the social strata that was there as well. He's just what a dynamic
Well,
cat.
and actually, that interview was done by the USF Libraries, and it's the Tampa Bay Estuary Project.
Oh, cool.
So so that was done by us, and that was actually Tico funded that project.
Nice.
So
I love
everything
it.
kind of came full circle.
How ironic.
Yeah.
The Strange Bedfellows, right? You
Yeah.
can have.
But really, it is a good project, though. And it's about not just activists, but also, how corporations all came to the table too, because we couldn't have done it without them.
Yeah, I saw on that list of oral histories, and I'm going to sit there and listen to it. Another rabbit hole for me.
Yeah.
Jan Platt, former
Right.
city councilwoman, county commissioner, great environmentalist. Peter Clark, I think, is interviewed on there. All the local legends,
Right.
and trying to
Right.
make the Bay better. And
Yeah.
and frankly, we've seen it get better. Over the last, decades, incrementally.
Well, and this is while millions of people are moving into the area, by the way. So, that's pretty amazing in and of itself that it hasn't just gone completely to pot because, we've had, I don't know how many millions of people move into the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But to not give the wrong idea, Gandy's collection isn't just about the environmental shots. I mean, there's a whole set of.
So you pulled it up on your little iPad here, and let's talk about some of these amazing shots from back in the day. Here's one. Wolf Brothers, for those of you who might remember it, there's a car with Wolf Brothers. I knew Mr. Wolf, Fred Wolf, and Airline of the Stars. What is that?
So
Is that national?
That is an advertising campaign, and there are several from Wolf Brothers. Both he and primarily Sandy Gandy, his dad, did a lot of the advertising photography for Wolf Brothers, which was a big department store in downtown Tampa for many years.
Yeah, it rivaled Moss Brothers downtown.
Did. And friendly competitors, I think.
Totally.
Yeah. And so there's a whole list of those, but that's just a small example of some of the things I think you see there's, and I put this story online and people jumped all over it. You know, my take on these photographs, both the Burgerts and Gandy's, isn't that every picture tells a story, it's that every picture has a story. And as I look at these photographs and I do the research and the history into what some of those buildings were, Haber's department store, for example, in downtown Tampa, I didn't know this history, but apparently it was a really big deal, really popular store. And one day it turns out that Mr. Haber got murdered.
Yes.
His wife was prosecuted for it and did 25 years in jail. And there's, you know, a whole detailed story that goes just with that photograph. And I think it's important that we, number one, as a city, but also as human beings, we remember not only the pleasant parts, but also some of our painful history and what Tampa was made of and what some of those buildings can remind us of. And when I put that online, my goodness, a lot of people just jumped on it and told not only was it their favorite store to shop in, but their remembrance of the Habers and that family and the horrible experience. Because he lived on Davis Island, so there were a lot of Davis Island people significantly impacted by that story. And so many photographs in the Gandy collection have those stories that go behind them. And I kind of see that as my lot in life is to not only publish those photographs, but also tell some of the history behind them, because there's some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Lenny, if you're listening, wasn't it Leanna's dad who worked at Haber's?
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I think EJ was a part of that trial. So this was a really big deal and
Big deal.
a huge story. I mean, tabloid before there was tabloid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How lucky are we to have, this history available to us, and to have storytellers like yourself, Chip, and Andy take complete ownership of all of this, step right in and fill that need for us. Tell me and listeners what it is about these old photographs. You got to switch hats now. We can talk f-stops and lighting all day long, but right now I want you to put on your psychologist hat.
Okay.
Tell me what it is that gives us changes our physiology about looking at some of these
Pulls
photographs.
at our heartstrings.
Especially the black and white ones. What is it about that takes us to that place that we can't really put our finger on, but we just compelled to look at it?
I've done a lot of thinking about this, not only just in general, but also my enthusiasm for these collections and why it touches me so much. And I guess what I come up with is physiologically. There's been a lot of study recently on trauma. And there's a part of our brain called the amygdala. It's right in the core of our brains. And in theory, what happens when we experience trauma is that that's where it's recorded. Not only do we take sort of a video or images of that event, but we also attach feelings to it. And so you've heard this word come up a lot recently about being triggered. Well, we see a sight or we hear a sound or we smell a smell, and it triggers that old image and brings on that emotion that we attach to that image. I think there's a positive side to that as well. When I see it, again, physiologically, I think what happens for me is there's this chemical in the brain called dopamine. And when we connect points in our brain and it feels good, we're like, wow, that's really cool. And I think that's what happens is that as we get older, we do that reminiscing about where we've been and what we've seen. And when we see that image, when we see that place, when we have that memory that goes with it and the feeling that goes with it, I think that's part of what happens and why so many people are turned on to these images. And I'm going to say especially as we get older.
Yeah.
Sometimes the younger generation, they're still experiencing, they're still collecting those images.
They're still making those connecting
there
points.
There it is. And,
I wonder if, so as Tempanos, as native, native-born folks like
Yes.
Chip and Mari and myself, we relate to these things on that level that you're talking about. But I also think it's important that folks who are new to town,
Yes.
and I'm sure you run into a lot of them.
A lot.
Are they interested in these photos too? Especially that before and after thing.
That's the thing, and that's what those books that I published are. They're both before and after, and it's just a wow factor because a lot of those buildings still exist, but they look very different, and a lot of people have been in them, and they never knew that history was there. So I think that's part of that piece.
Well, and I think I can speak for someone, who was born from out of town. I grew up in Clearwater, so a lot of the landmarks,
they resonate with you, Andy.
Well, no, I missed out on them.
Sure.
Honestly,
You don't get across a day when you're a kid. Yeah,
I did not spend a lot of time in Tampa when I was a kid. So, but for me, it's a different kind of nostalgia, And I was just helping a filmmaker the other day talking about. Postcards, Florida postcards.
Sure.
And how much images dictate what we imagine about a place.
Our belief system.
What we expect about it. Right.
Yeah.
Our belief system, everything. And so for better or worse, like Florida postcards and citrus labels and everything else sort of set the tone for what everyone expected Florida to be. And a lot of times what they made Florida once they got here.
You mean there's not flamingos everywhere?
Say nothing, Andy, of those stucky pecan logs at the rest stops. I'm just saying.
Andy, you ended up with the postcard collection, didn't you? Of
Hampton Dunn.
Of Hampton Dunn. And
it's
Lenny
great.
and I went over.
Talk about that.
Honey, tell that story about us going over to Hampton Dunn's house.
I loved Hampton Dunn, and I knew him. His real job was with AAA, but he did wonderful historical stuff. And for a while, he was doing a segment when I was at WTVT as a reporter. He was doing a weekly segment on his postcards and historic stuff. But yeah, we were lucky enough to go over to his house one day and sit around the table with his wife.
Oh, they were lovely.
Hampton. And it was just so great. And looking at these things, and he was so real. He was so down to earth and so warm and just.
And that was one of your earliest documentaries, was Postcards from Tampa Bay.
That's right. I was going to tell Andy Hughes he's cheating on me by talking to other documentary producers. I don't know about this one. I don't know about
And
this.
she's referring to Chip, who does documentaries.
Well, and one of the other things that we should mention here is that our dean has been the dean of the library system, Todd Chavez, has been very generous in giving us money to digitize, reformat photographs.
Sure.
But it all got gobbled up pretty quick on this plan. So the Gandy stuff did not make it into that plan, and so we had some money left over. But Chip is the one who got this whole thing started.
Wow. Nice.
By putting some of his own money into this, and we're currently in a fundraising campaign for this. It's kind of a mini fundraising campaign.
So they get mad at us if we ask specifically for money, but if people want to find out more about those efforts.
Right. You can look up Skip Gandy photograph collection.
At the USF libraries.
Yes, and we have a herd funding a web page for it, so you can just go on there and
Okay.
yeah, and
I think if you go to the Skip Gandy page at the USF Library, there's a link.
There is a link.
If you want to participate, we would love to.
so you can actually take a look at the photographs first if you want, and then click
some
on
of them.
on
Now
the
there's
link.
an
We
event.
have some. We only have a handful that are actually scanned, but and as Chip said, these are all small negatives, so they're a challenge. They're not just, you can't scan these like you scan a normal thing. So anyway, but we're really excited about this because for me, it's going to give us a whole new language of Tampa's past, basically.
Yeah, and there's an event coming up in regard to the collection, and I'm sure tell us about it, Chip.
It's
next week. Right?
Next Friday at 11 o'clock at the Tampa Bay History Center.
So after you listen to this show,
correct.
From 10 to 11 next Friday,
Scamper right over.
Scamper
right over there.
You can listen to it in your car
while you're
on the
driving
way
there.
over
That's right. That's right.
But at the History Center?
At the History
downtown.
Center. It's part of the Tampa Archives Week, something that the city sponsors. And we're going to have a presentation really on the history of photography the last 100 years, but primarily we're going to focus a lot on what the Gandy collection does. And I think I already said this, but basically the Burgerts were around from the late 1800s to the 1960s. The Gandy collection takes us from the 1960s really to the early 2000s, and it's just this beautiful lineage of visual parts of Tampa. So
Now, will there be like a slideshow?
There will.
Yeah, and how many photographs were in the Burgerts? I mean, was it something like 15,000?
The library so far has 20,000.
Okay.
And I talked to them not too long ago, and they say they're about done as far as scanning and putting them online.
Right.
But my understanding, when they found the Burgert collection in file cabinets in a garage in South Tampa, that was, they were really deteriorated. Originally, there was maybe 50,000 of those, but a lot of those had deteriorated.
This may be the time to make that ask of our listeners, if you're out there, because this is the time of our lives when, as our elders are transitioning and leaving us, and we don't even know what's in the attic, or we don't even know what's in that chest in the closet or buried somewhere.
Right.
Look, if you have these old photographs, if you're interested in preserving history and you want to contribute, this would be the time to do that. You don't just dispose of these things. If you don't know what to do with them, you walk them into a library. You reach out to the local historical society. You call Andy Hughes at USF. You reach out to Chip.
Or Creative on Main Street. Lynn, what do you guys do with old films?
Oh, yeah. We love people when they bring their old family films, the 8 millimeters, the even 16 millimeter. We are able to digitize them, which is wonderful.
And you incorporate them into a lot of your documentaries, just snippets of family stuff.
And if I can take a second, gentlemen, just to give a shout out to Jennifer Dietz at the City of Tampa.
Very much so.
Who is just an amazing archivist and really loves the history and lives it, and is a wonderful resource for anyone who wants either genealogy or documentary work or whatever. She's all in, and She's a fantastic person. So thanks, Jennifer, for all you do.
Mario, we're waiting for phone calls, but you got an email coming in?
I do. And don't be bashful about calling us, 813-239-9663. But I do have an email I'd like to read. Thank you for submitting this email. It says, "Hi, guys. I have a couple of books by John Sinchett, whose family ran the Sinchett Neon Sign Company. It's so cool to see the old neon signs that used to be seen all over the Tampa Bay area. It was neat to see how creative the signs were. The Little Pancake Inn sign on Hillsborough Avenue was one of the coolest. Keep up the great work." David Bryant. David, thank you so much for taking the time to remind us that the Sinchett family was also a big, big part of this.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. And if you haven't seen or purchased his book, it's a brilliant cross-section of signs, because his dad owned the sign company, and they both photographed it. Get a hold of that book and look if you like some of these vintage photographs of Tampa, because it's fantastic.
So, guys, another thing you two have in common is food, and I can't help but think that your paths cross.
Yum.
As I look at some of these photographs as well, a lot of them are restaurants. Here's the Sweden House. I remember it, but where was it?
Dale Mabry.
Dale Mabry, I thought so.
Yeah.
Dan Good Sandwiches. That looks like Dale Mabry as well. So anyway, how do you guys cross paths in terms? Andy, you're crazy foodie.
Chip, he actually was very generous. He took the picture for the cover for the Cuban Sandwich book. So along with Dr. Barbara Cruz and Jeff Hauk from the Columbia Restaurant, we wrote the book on the book right now on the Cuban Sandwich.
You can say that. You can absolutely say that.
The award-winning book, the award.
Award-winning. 2022, last year's Florida Food Book of the Year or something.
Yeah,
like
so it turned out really well, and I was really happy with Chip's work on it, and we really got to know each other then, and ever since then we realized how much we have kind of the same passion for this kind of stuff. The other thing I wanted to point out too is that the Gandy family, Skip, passed away in 2020, and I reached out to the family, and they actually agreed on a Creative Commons license for Skip's work, which is amazing. So it means
what does that mean?
It means you can treat them like the Burgert brothers. So if you got a private business and you want to make a calendar, and you want to sell that, you can do that.
An open license, really.
Yes, it's completely open
source.
So there's no copyright to deal with. All you have to do is give acknowledgement that this is courtesy of.
Did Skip have children?
Yes, he did. Yes,
Yeah.
he did.
And they were the ones that helped us with the permission. I want to tag on to that, though. Part of my fascination with the collection as I look through it, again, 80,000 photos, is that I actually found family members, 3 family members in that collection, and it was astonishing. And I think part of the fun that Tampa folks, Tampeños, are going to have,
Shout out.
are going to have is that there are dozens and dozens of businesses. Skip went in and took headshots and staff shots of dozens of businesses around. And I think part of the fun is going to be for Tampeños to look through that collection and see, wow, there's Uncle Bob, or, I remember my dad worked there. And one of the difficulties with Gandy's collection is they aren't well documented as far as exactly who the people are. The business is written on the envelope where the negatives are, but the specific folks, for the most part, aren't written.
And
But
I was gonna ask you about that because I read that in your comments. But can you get people to help you with that? Because
Yes.
I saw something that maybe I was a little more familiar with than you were, or something like that, and I want to give you that feedback.
Yes.
How can people give
Make
you
that
feedback?
ask, Chip, and an email address. Well, the best way they can get in touch with you.
Well,
I'm gonna pass that to Andy.
That's where your librarians come in. You just give me a call, and we might actually have a protocol for that once it actually goes up, and people start to interact with the material.
And the interactive nature of it would be
we may have
great.
an actual protocol for it where people can. So and we have an amazing digital curator, Amanda Bozar. Hello, Amanda.
Yeah.
Shout out to Amanda.
Great
Yeah,
job.
and so I think I bet she could make some kind of workflow to where you could click on I know something about this photo right next
Make
to
a
the
comment,
photo.
make a comment
and
next
make
to it,
a
yeah.
I
comment.
think in the Mosley collection, which we'll talk about another day, I think that there is a feedback section there. Did you know Julia Mosley, et cetera? Send us your thoughts and your memories.
It's even happening online now. One of the 200 photos that Skip that's printed is of a guy holding a bunch of loaves of Cuban bread, and it just says something like "man holding Cuban bread." And someone put it online yesterday. It turns out that was Joe Valdez, who was the owner of Spanish Park Restaurant. I didn't know that, but it's that collective knowledge of the community and of the city that can help label some of the stuff and help us get a broader understanding of what these images stand for. And so I think it would be a great thing to have a
It
feedback loop.
contextualizes
Exactly
everything.
right.
And if anybody's out there, leaning in right now going, I know where we can help, this is your opportunity to be a part of something that's bigger than everybody in this room.
Yeah.
I think that when it's all said and done, these pictures and the stories will be captured into perpetuity. So 100 years from now, people doing research on the Tampa Bay area, Tampa specifically in this case, but this is the time to develop all of those protocols.
And once those images are online, again, of the businesses and things, having that feedback loop will be helpful. And there's so many people that still have knowledge, and that's part of why I feel so compelled to do it now, is that as we get older, myself included, as I look at these images, I can connect to them. 25 years from now, there will be fewer people who do.
Yeah, and that dopamine's kicking in.
That, oh man, every
Isn't it?
time I
Isn't it?
see
We
that
can
image,
hear
I'm
it
like,
in your
wait a minute.
voice.
I know that place, and then I go online and I find it, and and I find the address and all that, and I can look at the old building.
And listen,
that
this is
dopamine
not
hits.
just about Tampa. This is the whole Bay Area.
Correct.
I
Exactly
think this
right.
station, we're out in 5 or 6 counties. If you want to join the conversation, we're at 813-239-9663. You can email us at dj@wmnf.org. We've got Andy Hughes and Chip Weiner, two fantastic guys who are just helping us save the memories. And they're here with us today talking about Skip Gandy and his fantastic collection. So, Chip, I'm sitting here looking at JFK in Tampa.
How
In
about
color.
that? In color.
And I'm not sure if he came to Tampa twice, once in 59, 60 when he was running, and then in 63, I think 4 or 5 days before.
4 days before. You're right. You got that right.
Thank you. And
I believe this is the 63 because there's also other images of him in his awesome helicopter taking off. And there's just, it's so
so that was
fantastic.
at
Lopez
Al
Field.
Lopez Field.
Right.
Yep.
And Lynn, you have a little expertise in this.
Just a little, but I do agree. I think that's 1963 from the other photos we used in the documentary.
Yeah, I see that it says seal of the president. So clearly this was after he was elected.
And color photos, because what we've seen, Tony Zapponi, the man with the plan, the
Shout
guy
out to
who
Tony.
had his
Shout out
camera
to
there.
Tony.
Yeah. His photos, I think, really have been at the front of the line here for a long time related to Kennedy's visit. But as I'm going through this collection and I see these color photographs of Kennedy, and I'm like, oh my goodness, just more compelling reasons to get this thing digitized because there's so much of
Chip,
it.
it's almost like the first time when you see color film footage
Yeah.
of the Major League Baseball scene back in the 1930s and 40s. Because everything we've seen up to that point was black and white. And then when
Right.
you see that Dodger blue, that Brooklyn Dodger blue, or it just does something. Again, the physiology changes, that dopamine kicks in. Just this picture here, you realize the sun hitting JFK in a certain way. You see the red in his hair, which, ordinarily you wouldn't think of something like that. So
Well,
it's
it's
really
funny.
stunning.
It's funny you mentioned the red in his hair because our good friend Joe Gonzalez in Lenny's documentary, what did he say, hon?
Yeah, he said he had red hair growing up as a kid. He was in one of the marching bands to welcome the president when he came to Tampa. And he was so thrilled to see that the president had red hair like he did as a little boy. It was just a thrill. But these, it touches our hearts and it comes alive when it's in color, doesn't it? It's just like, wow.
Yeah, and the colors are really beautiful. And there's another photograph from the same day where on the stage there's Kennedy speaking, but there's a whole bunch of other politicians behind him, including like Sam Gibbons, who just joined Congress from the Florida Senate at the time.
Yeah, they were good friends.
Yeah, you've got Terrell Sessoms, of course, who's no longer with us.
Lenny got
Nick
to
Nuccio.
Lenny got to interview Sam Gibbons. It was the last interview he gave before he passed, talking about his glorious, wonderful day spent with his good friend Jack Kennedy.
As I think about it, there's images during the campaign as well because it's my favorite image that I found so far. It's of the Kennedy Johnson rocket that they pulled around with a car. It's down on Bayshore Boulevard, and it looks like a rocket, and there's this cool guy standing next to it. It's fantastic.
Did they put it in Gasparilla Parade or something? Or?
No, they just pulled it around the country, I think, for the campaign. Paul Guzzo wrote a cool article on this for the Tampa Times. And
Shout out to Guzzo.
thank you.
Jason, what do young people think about these historic photos? Is this just something that we care about?
I've always been a sucker for my folks' sepia tone photos. I mean, like growing up, they were always right when you walked in the living room. They were literally right on the mantelpiece. So I mean, as a
Same
kid,
thing.
I've always had like a deep seated nostalgia for them. So like, I appreciate the Kodachrome, I guess we'll say.
Kodachrome.
That technique that was used back then, in the earliest days with the plates and the silver night and all the things that had to be the developing of the pictures, that just has progressed. And now where we are, we need to preserve I'm going to make an all-out call out right now to anybody who's out there listening.
Get
If you wanna,
in your attic.
Yeah, if you want to help, this is a great time if you want to contribute what you have presently. You don't know what to do with the photos you have of your family members.
All right, you got an email there?
I do, and I want to read this as well. Thank you. It says, thank you all for sharing this amazing information. Not a native, a great conversation. Thank you, Beth, for sending in that wonderful email. So you see, this resonates with everybody. This is universal. What we're talking about is universal.
So this next picture I'm looking at just cracks me up because it's old and it's new and it's present. This is the in Hyde Park Village, the restaurant that is now what?
Bar Taco.
Bar Taco. It's sort of triangular shaped restaurant at the confluence of Snow and something else. But that restaurant has been there forever.
That photograph is of Bone Shakers, and people who were around in the 70s and 80s will remember that.
Was that the first one at that location?
It was.
Yeah.
It lasted for 3 years. It then transformed into TGI Fridays.
Yeah, Fridays.
That red and white awning, classic.
Yeah, classic. And from there, Cactus Club, I believe,
That's
was
right.
next.
Club, yeah.
That was Herb Gold, owned the Cactus Club back in the day.
Shout out to Herb.
And so, again, just this whole lineage, and it starts with that. And when I put that image online, folks were just, I remember Bone Shakers, and I went there and I drank when I was underage. And, just people able to remember their lives is just so cool.
My dad, rest in peace, did not take us out to restaurants very often. Okay, I will not abuse him any more than that. But I do remember distinctly that he wanted to go to Fridays, and that was such a big deal because it was a sit-down restaurant. Yeah. We're not talking Steak and Shake or Frisch's Big Boy.
Right.
Okay, it was a sit-down restaurant, and we all had to behave.
Did you
Well,
behave,
apparently
John?
not everyone behaved at Bone Shakers, from what I understand.
Right.
Thursday and Friday nights was,
Rocks.
just a lot of fun from what from the feedback I get from people. So,
And we should remind everybody, if you're a fan of the Robertson Fresh photographic collection, and the Burger Brothers, which we mentioned earlier, roughly about 20,000 images. This is 4 times that amount.
Yes.
So we really need to do all we can to help these two fine gentlemen in the cause of preserving all of these negatives. Can you imagine what's left that hasn't been developed
That's
yet?
a lot of work.
I can't wait.
And
It's a
Andy,
lot of
what's
work,
that-
and it's going to
what's
take
that-
a lot of resources.
Yeah, what's that website again so they can see it, they can hear about it, they can hear about the efforts to preserve?
Yeah, if you look up Skip Gandy photo collection, you'll see a couple different but the one with the actual, I think it's Digital Commons, I believe. That's the website is going to have that in it. That will actually have the photographs that some of that are actually digitized already, and then if you scroll down, there's a link to the herd funding page.
So I've got a photograph I'm looking at, and this one Mario perked up on when he saw it earlier.
you know,
One of the earliest malls in the area. And did you hang out there, Mario?
Everybody did. Who didn't? If you didn't go to the Tampa Bay Mall, which is now on the property that houses One Buck Place, you know, it was the coolest thing happening when it happened.
The Tampa Bay Mall, and you were running around as a kid.
No.
Causing trouble. Come on.
It was my high school years already. I was already into high school. I was driving already by that time, so I could get there on my own.
Causing
But it
trouble.
was the kind of mall that was 2 levels, so
It was great.
we didn't have that. That was cool. The food court was exceptional. It had a movie theater certainly, but the neat part about it was you could go there, and on any given Friday or Saturday, you could see, like, okay, in that little corner is a collection of Hillsborough High School students. Look, TC's over there.
Run into all your friends.
All of your pals.
And Winnie, what did you and Christopher
Oh,
do?
shout out to Christopher Humphreys. He loved that mall. We would go there and just hang out and walk. And
Glass
window shop,
elevator.
and
How cool was that?
It was just
But
great.
see, this is what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
exactly.
All of those memories. That's the thing. That's the juice. That's what gets this collection up and running. Tampa Bay Center is one of 80,000 photos that everyone that's been in Tampa for any amount of time can glom onto and have some recollections, some good recall. And by the way, get a copy of the photograph once we get this stuff digitized.
cool
You can
is
go
that?
online, download it, print it, put it on your living room wall if that's what you want to do.
There was Spencer's Gifts, and remember they had
Yeah.
a Jersey Jim Towers. If you're at all a techie or you liked the latest and the newest, they had gizmos and screens and computers, and it was great. And then the shopping was great. It was just
He took images in there when it was being built, so there's some construction photos in there as
Wow.
well. Yeah.
I get the proverbial goosebumps just thinking about it.
The evolution of shopping in Tampa is, really in the whole Bay Area, because I'm sure St. Petersburg went through the same thing. But back in the 50s, you went downtown,
Right.
and then in the 60s, which is more familiar to me, and we lived over toward Britton Plaza. I rode my little Stingray bicycle up to Britton Plaza,
100%.
and that's where you went. And then as we got into high school, then maybe
You drove
if
a little further.
You went a little further, and you went to the Tampa Bay Mall or to University Mall. Some of those air conditioned
West Shore Mall.
or West
East
West
Lake
Shore Mall
Square.
for sure. So, but anyways, it's sort of evolved. Now, of course, malls are dying, so to speak. They're being
Repurposed in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Reconfigured. I know.
Nice
I know.
one,
It's-
Jason.
Yeah, that
You
was,
just redeemed
he woke
yourself.
up. He woke up. With a minute to go, Jason joined. There he is.
Oh my God, he's 2 for 2.
Okay, Jason, don't overdo it.
With a
Damn
minute
boy.
to go. Listen, we just want to say, guys, thank you so much for joining us in studio today. Andy,
Oh, thank you.
always.
Andy
Chip,
Hughes.
Thank you,
Chip
guys.
Weiner.
thank you. And listen, please come back maybe in a little bit of time and tell us where we are and what we need to do to continue to push the ball down the field and hopefully get it across the
And
finish line.
it's a great show, guys. Keep it dirty, Mario.
Yeah, well, we tried.
just to re-
You saw me at the beginning, tried to.
I
but-
know. You know what? I got to lighten it up every now and then. The phones didn't ring as much, but we know people were listening.
They were.
And we appreciate you guys coming on and joining us, telling us about the Skip Gandy collection. You can see it at University of South Florida Collections and also at the event on the 14th at the History Center.
Be there next week.
Be there.
Be there next week or be square. Be there or be square.
Yes.
It's
You guys
at
are superheroes.
11 o'clock next week, and I can promise you, as soon as the show wraps, we're racing down there to be with you guys.
sure.
Let me say that, and I say this each and every week, and I say it and I mean it with all of my heart on behalf of my broadcast partner, John Dingfelder, our engineer, Jason Marlowe, who woke up at the end of the show. Thank you so much.
Been here.
Our phone screener who contributed mightily today, our part-time producer as well, Lynn Marvin Dingfelder.
Hola.
I'm Mario Nunez. I'd like to say, stay tuned now because in just a couple of minutes, the Skinny is coming up with Ray Roa, Ben Montgomery, and Mitch Perry. Have a nice weekend, everybody. We love you. Salud and happy days. Be well, everyone.